I thought this morning I would start with a little reflection on the roots of people pleasing. And it's always, it always comes down to the bottom line is always shame, where which is the feeling that we want to disappear, that we want to. One author talked about it as actually wanting to tear the eyes out of anybody who's looking at us because we feel so shameful. And we have to defend against the direct feeling of shame early in life because it's too painful. We couldn't carry on. It's hard to reconnect as an adult with how devastating the experience of shame is. And then as an adult, when at some point in our journey, if we're doing deep work, we re-experience the feeling. Like, for me, it came. You don't have to do medicine work, but it helps me because you have to trust enough or be willing to drop through your defenses, all the ways that we prop ourselves up against feeling so annihilated, because that's the feeling of shame. And by the time we're adults, we're so well defended that the symptoms of shame seem very subtle. We find ourselves apologizing. We find ourselves not asking for what we need, what we want, but we get by, and nobody sort of observing us would think, well, that person's full of shame. But we subtly control conversations so that we never have to experience rejection. Perfectionism is a manifestation of shame. Figuring out exactly what we need to say. So it's the absence of spontaneity, the absence of just being able to relax and be ourselves, really. We find ourselves apologizing, like, oh, sorry about that. One way to think about this is the ego is a construction, is an entire defensive curation against this deep feeling of shame. So there's so many ways to talk about it, but it's the shame of not being loved. We take on shame when the person who we need to love us doesn't love us, and we're ashamed of not being loved. And then we curate the personality and people pleasing. But another way to talk about it is that we don't feel like we deserve to live our own unique life. So we move into the performance of a life versus actually living our life. Or we accept treatment from others that, if we weren't in a condition of shame, we wouldn't accept. We would feel it immediately as mistreatment and be unwilling to tolerate it. We would speak with our own voice. I'm a guitar player and I like to sing. But for many, many years, what I would do is mimic the voice of the song I was learning. So I would sound like Bruce Cockburn, for example. He's an artist that, and what's happening to me, or what happened to me as I did sort of the healing from the shame, is I started to sing whatever I was singing, but it was coming out as my voice. And that's where the power was. People started paying attention then because they thought it was cool that I could sound like other artists. That's pretty good. You sound just like them. It's amazing. But then when you start singing with your own voice, and see, that's another subtle manifestation of shame. I'll sing it the way they sing it instead of with my own voice because we've lost our voice somewhere along the line. And even that is rooted in shame. And I was thinking about this another way to, I was thinking about the word disgraced or disgrace and the etymology of that. Disgrace, the loss of the condition of grace. And if we understand grace as the feeling that we proceed in life as if we're perfectly okay, as if we're so loved that who we are spontaneously and naturally is the way to be. And so we're walking in a state of grace. The voice that sounds at Jesus' baptism, that Jesus hears at his baptism according to the gospel, is like, you are my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. And that's the moment when he starts his mission of proclaiming and enacting the kingdom of God, this domain of grace that people can experience from within, to know that they are loved unconditionally by, quote unquote, the Father, the Mother, Source, Creator. And that undoes, to know that is to undo the state of disgrace, to be oriented according to disgrace, which is the feeling that I'm a disgrace, or which is the same as a belief that I'm bad, I don't matter, I have to prove myself, I'm not valid, I'm the cause of your misery. All of that ego belongs to the condition of disgrace. You're an exile from the domain of grace, from the kingdom or the queendom of God. And ego is the manifestation of that condition of disgrace. So the healing then is to however this happens, whether you hear the voice from above saying, you are my beloved in whom I am well pleased, or whether that voice by some grace is your own, that is able to turn towards yourself in all conditions, in all circumstances, and say, you are my beloved in whom I am well pleased. So we extend that state of grace towards ourselves. And there's no need then to be in the world to please others, because the people-pleasing condition is because we don't trust that we're in the state of grace, so we have to earn the state of grace. I have to do what you think I should do, be how you think I should be, in order to attain that state of grace that was taken from me early by those who should have spoken with that voice. So now that's what we're looking for, is the state of grace. With all the people pleasing, that's basically, we're wanting to return home to that condition of grace, which is, I would say, our natural condition. That's kind of a theological, spiritual framing of it, but for me, I hold to that we radically belong here, and we were meant to proceed in life as if we matter, as if to walk in this state of grace. And that got taken away from most of us. Theologically, that's the fall from the garden. That's the fall that religious traditions talk about. This is the fall from a condition of innocence where we are graced by that voice that assures us, you are my beloved. Before you've done one blessed thing in this world, before you've done anything to prove yourself, you were born into this world as a helpless baby, you were my beloved then. And that's what we're looking for with people pleasing. And when we realize that, when you really get that, like how vulnerable we are, how deep our longing is for that condition of grace, of knowing that in our bones, it evokes, I think, an organic compassion. It's like, oh my God, that's all I want. I just want to know that, you know, I'm lovable. I just want to know myself as that, and then proceed in life from that place. And when we proceed in life from that place, we are in covenant with the big thing, with the big heart. It's a gesture of faith to then, because life purpose becomes just about expressing that. Like if we're legitimate, that's all we need to do is realize that we are beloved in a state of grace. And all that, whatever you want to call that, wants is for us to express that. That's enough. Be you, whatever that looks like, whatever that feels, but it'll be unique. And of course, that's what is not possible when we have this other project, sort of the survival project of trying to elicit grace, trying to prove, trying to justify ourselves in order to attain that state, which is unattainable by effort. The people-pleasing thing we hope will work, but it never does. Because it's, in the end, it's something that we have to relax into. And at the beginning of the relaxation, there's just grief, because we realize we're living in exile. We've been kicked out of the Garden of Eden. The gates there are guarded by cherubims with flaming swords. There's no going back. We're now east of Eden, and life is a matter of survival, which is, I think, what that story in Genesis is all about. Because of, and note in the garden, because the couple was shamed. They noticed that they were naked and felt shame and tried to cover themselves up. That cover, I think, is ego. And then life becomes the toil of proving ourselves. So it's a big thing we're doing. We're calling it people pleasing. It's like that's just the way in. That's just the way in. What we're really doing is trying to come home to ourselves. And then once we feel that condition of grace, once we know that we've been in a state of disgrace through no fault of our own, then we can feel compassion for ourselves, hear that voice, and then proceed in the domain of grace, the kingdom of God, the queendom of God, the reign of God, the reign of source, of creator. And then life begins, which is whatever the metaphor of being born again is, that's got to be what it means. You're born again spiritually, which is to be born again of the truth of who you actually are. Before the humiliation, before the discovery that you are a disgrace, which should never happen to anybody ever. And yet, our species finds ourselves in a state of disgrace. And that's why we treat each other with such violence, such inhumanity. We're not living in that original grace. And that's why, I would say people pleasing, actually, when we're engaged in it, it's actually it's a kind of symptom of that violence, of the violence that was done against us. And now it's a kind of violence enacted against everybody else who we're trying to control to elicit that love. But it's manipulative, ultimately, because when we're unconscious, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know that we're doing that, but that's kind of what we're doing. So everything's in this. I mean, everything's there. And the door, it's just a door to open to say, well, and people pleasing. It's like, okay, well, what are we doing when we're doing that? If you do it deeply, I mean, you can stick to the behavioral things of just trying to say no more often or creating better boundaries, which is great, but it'll never hold. It'll never, because if you don't address the disgrace, then it'll just come back. It's impossible to change this at a behavioral level, because it's not behavioral, it's an identity. And so what's required is an identity shift from into the identity of the beloved, which is actually who you are. All right. End of reflection. How are you, beloveds? This